Welcome back to the Mina Show featuring Lenny. Final Monday Night Football Recap Edition. We're going to talk a little bit about Monday night. It was actually kind of an interesting game. I think a little bit more interesting maybe than I anticipated, in large part because both teams tried, which if it was any other team other than the Lions, probably would not have happened. And I think we learned a fair amount about that team and the Niners, who I want to talk about as well. The second half of this podcast, instead of doing winners and woofs, I asked you, Domonique, to join me to help me pick my MVP vote, because I am an MVP voter and I have been waiting until the last second. I know, no big deal.
It is a big deal. Congratulations.
It is an unbelievably tight race. I gathered a bunch of stats. I went through some of my notes from games over the years, and I actually need this conversation with you to pick it because it is wild. And then I have a few football New Year's resolutions that I'm going to wrap with. But first, the Lions win 40-34 in what proved to be an offensive explosion. Let's start with the Lions side of this. Domonique, once I realized they were actually playing starters, not just in the first, the entire game,
right.
My interest in watching this team was kind of to watch them with an eye towards whether or not in the playoffs, the defensive injuries would prove to be too much to overcome. And it was an interesting case study in that regard because the Niners seemingly moved the ball at will on this defense outside of the Brock Purdy interceptions. But the offense just went toe-to-toe every single time and held up their end of the bargain. My feeling generally is that's just what it's going to have to be moving forward. Was that your takeaway watching this? And by the way, Lions fans, they're capable of it because, Oh my God, this offense.
It was a preview of what they would have to do in the playoffs. They have to essentially play mistake-free football on offense. There was one drive, I think, that they didn't score on. And, also they're going to have to go for it on fourth downs. And the one drive they didn't score on, they lost the ball on downs after holding the ball for 15 plays. So I think all the obvious things, I think your audience is probably pretty sophisticated football audience, so we don't need to break down all the, obvious things like they need to possess the ball and they can't turn it over. But I think what we saw last night was a near perfect offensive performance and a defensive performance that's opportunistic. And I hate that I have to use these kind of cliches, but that's the way that they're going to have to win in the playoffs is you can't drop the interceptions. You have to get on the fumbles. They're going to happen. They're going to be plays, but you cannot hope that, or you can't expect to get a defensive stop ever because this 49ers team isn't a real competitor, and they had their way with them offensively. So that was a preview of the best case scenario for the Lions. Until
the interception, the first interception, it just felt like every play action pass was wide open on this Lions defense. They've been, since Aiden Hutchinson went down, they've blitzed at the highest rate in football. They blitzed Brock Purdy on 42% of dropbacks in this game. He went 11 for 14 for 147 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. And I think that's just it. They're going to have to play the variance game. Fortunately, their DBs are still very good. Brian Branch was probably the best pass rusher in this game. And Kirby Joseph is an actual ball hack. We talk turnovers.
9.
Yeah.
Incredible. 2 in this game, so it's a little skewed, but 9 picks for Kirby is an awesome season. Can I make one point about them that I think is somewhat encouraging is from a player standpoint. The playoffs, when you're on a team with expectations, it feels like a lot of pressure. And I will say for them, it kind of feels like them being in this position alleviates pressure, not in a general way, but in a very specific way, in that they know they're going to go for it on fourth downs. Their offense recognizes that they have to be successful every play, which I think sounds like more pressure, but it's also let's go. We can run the trick plays. We can do whatever. And from the defensive perspective, I think, and this is where it resonated with me, is I recognize being in playoff games and being I can't up. That's a bad place to feel. They are in these games I just got to make my play. We're gonna give up stuff.
Stop. Yeah,
it's different. It's I just got to make my play, and it's a different headspace to be in.
That's interesting. I like your point about how the offense, they're just playing so free. It's which is remarkable because of the amount of pressure on them. It does feel to beat the creme de la creme of the NFC. And we'll preview this week coming up against the Vikings, which is are a really, really good team with a really, really good defense, they probably have to put up more than 30 points a game, but they can. I was struck in this one not just by the trick plays. I mean, the lateral was one thing. I don't know if you saw at one point Panay Sewell ran a fake reverse, which nothing happened, but you're like, oh, that's on tape for a reason. But Dominic, I was struck by not only that, but I thought Jared Goff was exceptional in this. Obviously the level of difficulty for him is lower than for a lot of quarterbacks because the infrastructure of the offense, the offensive line, all of it, the run game. Gibbs, by the way, without Montgomery, amazing. But I thought he made some, pretty freaking impressive throws. And like, if he continues to play at this level, I really do think they're good enough to hold up this defense. But it's going to be, next week is going to be really telling because that is going to be the hardest defense that they face, maybe until the Eagles, and that'll be challenging.
I don't know. I agree with you, and it might have been with you where I was talking about like the way that Jared Goff has elevated his game in some ways. I think it might have been the Monday night. Was it Monday night? Whatever. I've seen him, and he's not the same quarterback that I think we view him as. So he's able to make these plays that are not all play action dependent, use his athleticism to manipulate the defense and make plays. So like the way he's playing this year, incredible. That's great. Where I will say, I think you're right. They have the offensive ability to beat anybody, which is why this game coming up is so important. Is I don't know if they have the ability to beat anybody once. To beat everybody 3 times is a lot to ask. So like getting the first round bye, I think matters a lot more to them than any other team.
Getting to play at home too. Yeah. This team in particular with this quarterback and this fan base, it is more valuable for them to play at home than it is for some other teams. That's not a diss. That's just and it's very realistic, right? Like that is definitely something that could happen. They are going to get some guys back. They talked about even David Montgomery coming back, Alex Anzalone coming back. I think that is sneaky huge for him to get Anzalone back for the postseason because, they're going at those linebackers.
Spotlighting the backers is a weekly occurrence for the Lions team.
So I came out of this, just to kind of put a button on the Lions, I came out of it feeling like the defense is what I thought it was, but the offense has not lost any steam whatsoever. And maybe that's why Dan Campbell played them. I feel like we don't have to have that conversation. Yeah. The mood today would be very different if somebody had gotten hurt, and you can't.
Yeah, of course.
It's what it is. Yeah. I'm glad that nobody got hurt because I didn't feel like having that debate today.
I was nervous when Amon-Ra was limping around for a second. I was like, oh gosh, we have to do this.
But he's such a good player, by the way. How about Tim Patrick too? Just some of those blocks that he is delivering for them, massive. Okay, so the Niners I think are kind of in a fascinating spot because this was it was the worst possible or most. Let me put it this way: it did not clarify the Brock Purdy conversation in any way because a few things happened. One, he was lights out, and then he threw 2 horrible interceptions, and they were on him. Fully on him, right? Like, 1, he sailed it over the middle of the field. 2, the Lions knew exactly what they do because it's what they always do on those deep in-breakers off of play action, and Joseph jumped it, as you said. I think Ben pointed out, a few people pointed out, they were playing like an inverted cover 2, which is a good defense to play against the Niners style of offense. I think Ben pointed out with Tua also throwing an interception against that because you throw into those spots assuming that it's going to be open, but you've got a safety there instead, and Joseph knew it was coming. The other thing that happened is he got hurt, right? So near the end of the game, he hurt his elbow, which is a reoccurring injury for him. He's going to get an MRI on Monday, so it's going to be a little bit. But, now he's probably going to miss week 18. It's another multiple games missed. He has injury history. All of this weighs into the Niners' decision in terms of whether or not to give him a long-term contract. As always, Domonique, these things are relative. It's not
Yeah.
in a, like we don't know what kind of contract is on the
Right.
table. What are the quarterback options, including one who was their backup last year, who's going to be a free agent in Minnesota,
Mhm.
whether or not that's something that they'd be pursuing. Like where, without being like totalistic about it, like where are you
No.
at with Brock Purdy and the Niners moving forward?
And he was so good early in the season too. I think you won't be surprised where I land on this because it's kind of where I land on every quarterback should we or shouldn't we conversation. The answer is pay him. And like I get your point, there is a line where you wouldn't pay him that much. But generally, if you have a quarterback that operates in your system, I want to keep him. And I know that like I had this argument. I think you and I had the disagreement about Darnold. I had it today with Graziano again. But this is at every point, and I remember pretty clearly um, Baker Mayfield was the one that I think I was probably most wrong about because immediately, and I guess I could argue that I'm right again now, but I was wrong about how they would handle it and what happened. But even Baker Mayfield, I was like, pay him. You got a quarterback, pay him as soon as possible because it's not going to get any cheaper. And so I guess that doesn't sound like much of a vote of confidence for Brock Purdy because I'm scared. I know how dark it is, how cold it is out there in quarterback winter. And you got a nice little blanket. It got some holes in it, but I'm not about to throw that away. Assume I can find something else. You might be braver than me, though.
I'm going to throw out a couple scenarios for you. Let's say, would you rather pay Sam Darnold 50 some million dollars a year or Brock Purdy 50? Because with
Yeah,
Darnold, you're buying the crest, right?
right.
He's coming off of his best season as a pro, playing in an amazing situation with an incredible coach, and you have an incredible coach too. With Purdy, it's the dip. That's the thing. Like he is coming off of, difficult end to the season, lots of injuries in the Niners offense. So you kind of know what is happening here, but it's hard not to compare the two of them.
Yeah, I mean, my answer is easy. It's Brock Purdy. It's like, if I'm the 49ers, I guess if you're asking a question as like I'm just a random team, but if I'm a
Yeah.
49ers, I'd rather have Brock Purdy, who's done it here for us well. And he has limitations. That's fine. You can work around those limitations. But if those are my two options, it seems easy and obvious. And if I were in Minnesota, it would be the same thing. It's like, yeah, I
Yeah,
paid a
right.
guy that I have that I'm
And
watching do this now.
the other thing about Darnold and Purdy, this is one kind of tied to one of my resolutions. Sam Darnold has gotten better, right? Like he was not this obviously,
Yeah.
it's obviously with the Jets, but I'm even thinking about the Panthers where he played
Yeah.
a lot. You've seen him clearly get better with age. Who's to say that Brock Purdy won't get better as the years goes on? He's really young. He's had 2 seasons in the NFL. So there's also the opportunity, I think, to capture some upside there. What concerns me is the injuries, actually, because that's same elbow, injured before,
Mhm.
multiple games now, smaller quarterback. That would give me some pause with a long-term deal. I mean, ideally for the Niners, you would be able to structure it in sort of a Jimmy Garoppolo style fashion where you're locked in for a couple years, but you can revisit it after that. I don't know though what kind of leverage Purdy has, like what he would take or won't take, which is why it makes it difficult. Okay, one more quarterback scenario for you.
Oh,
Ready?
okay. Oh, sure. Okay. I had some Purdy thoughts, but let's hear the scenario.
Okay. Brock Purdy at 50 whatever million dollars a year, multiple years, like a Tua style contract. I don't know. Or trade a second for JJ McCarthy, who's making like, $6 million a year, whatever.
No, I mean, this is again, it's me. I'm scared. I'd keep the quarterback that I have. Like, I'm not. You haven't answered this, and I guess it's your show, so you can choose to answer it or not. But you've laid it out in two separate scenarios and have taken no position on either. Are you going to go with JJ McCarthy, this unknown quantity, or pay Brock Purdy $50 million?
Because of the injuries, I would not give Brock Purdy a contract that's more than a couple years. That's my answer. If you can get him to agree to a contract that's just a couple years, though, like guaranteed, obviously you'd have a longer term
Right.
structure. I would keep Purdy.
Right.
That's my answer.
The contract, the way I mean, contracts being structured in certain ways is normally not interesting conversation, but I find this one kind of interesting because oftentimes you backload these contracts in order to make a run and free up cap space, but it doesn't feel like this team is in championship contention right now, so it might make sense, and especially for Purdy, to front load this contract and maintain the flexibility because the result of backloading a contract is oftentimes you're forced to renegotiate. And then what you're signing up for by backloading the contract is a quarterback for a decade
That's
because
right.
you're
A
stuck.
lot
You
of
know what I mean?
quarterback contracts are like that.
Right.
Like,
And so you're kind of signing up to be forced to restructure, which then means that you're extending the contract. And if you are uncertain about Brock Purdy's future, his health or his talent, then you might want to structure this differently. And they aren't in play. I mean, maybe they think they're in Super Bowl contention next year, but I would argue they're not.
yeah, a lot of difficult contract decisions looming. Hargrave, who doesn't play this year, Greenlaw, Tavarius Ward. I will say, silver lining for the Niners. I thought Ricky Pearsall was nice to
Mhm.
see him have a breakout game. Like, he's a first round receiver. Obviously, had a chaotic offseason, getting shot, didn't play for a while. You need him. You signed Ayuk for sure, but you eventually will see what happens with George Kittle down the road. Your offense is going to have to evolve. So to have him and like Debo, they're going to move on from at some point.
Yeah.
So to have him play well, I thought he looked really good in this. He looked explosive, made some tough catches, looked good with the ball in his hands. That's a win for your future, I
Mhm.
suppose. But it's going to be tricky. It's the thing about a Purdy contract too is like depending on how it's structured, you might not actually be up against it next year, so you're still going to
Right.
have some cap space at the beginning. So it's going to be a tough offseason for John Lynch, who they showed during the broadcast. That man has aged like the Obama presidency. Oh my God. He was.
Yeah. They showed him a couple times, and he every time they showed him, he looked like he got older.
I feel like it's funny when you're a GM because you know you're going to be on camera at some point, but you don't know when. And if it's going to, like, you got to really contain your emotions, I feel like.
Yeah, I don't know who approved putting those cameras in the like the coaches suite where they
Yeah.
have those
For the
cameras
Still
like
Dorsey freak out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, to catch those sorts of things, but I want cameras out, and I'm a general manager. I feel the same way. I don't want you to see how I react or somebody read my lips for the names I'm calling my own players.
I think they cut to him when Brock Purdy threw his second interception
Yeah.
and he said something. It looked like the F word, but I was trying to. He did a surrender
Yeah,
cobra at one point.
absolutely.
Okay, let's take a quick break, come back, and figure out who the heck I'm voting for MVP. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words, Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer: hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. All right, Domonique, we are back. This MVP race, it feels like this is the week where it kind of popped off. I mean, it's been subtly, not subtly, but it's obviously you and I are both do First Take. We talk about it all the time. But it felt like this week, I don't know, just the discourse really hit another level and I think it's because it felt like Allen had it for maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and then Lamar came over the top with those big wins. And then Joe Burrow suddenly is like maybe on the knocking on the door of the playoffs, although I don't think it's going to happen. And then Saquon broke 2,000. So you got 4 guys who are really in the thick of it. You can make a case for other players. There are Lions fans in my mentions screaming about Goff. There are Commanders fans saying we would be nothing without Jane Daniels, which honestly is like not a bet. He actually has like a case in that regard. But
Yeah.
I believe it's those 4 guys. Let's start from there. Are we in agreement there?
Yeah, I mean, we can. Yeah, your show, you run it how you want to run it, but yeah, I think these 4 guys are reasonable, like contenders for the trophy.
Okay, let's do the Saquon one kind of separately. We'll bring it in. Let's talk about the quarterbacks at first, if that's okay with you. So I gathered a bunch of stats just to kind of put it, and First of all, Lamar is the statistical choice. Let's just start there.
Yeah.
Like he should be. However, it is really effing close. I mean, QBR, Lamar 77.91, Allen 76.8, Burrow 76.7.
The same thing. They're all the same thing.
With
It's the same thing.
Interestingly, Burrow is way above the others in completion percentage over expected, but a lot of that reflects the structure of the offense, which we will talk about.
Yeah, and the talent of the receivers.
Total touchdowns, passing and rushing combined, Burrow is actually in the lead, but it's 44-43. So this weekend
again,
and then Allen is 40. So it's tight. Interceptions, Lamar has the least. And then Allen and Burrow, but it's all pretty low. But Lamar has the least 4. Allen has 6. Burrow has 8. Lamar is the leader in touchdown to interception ratio by a pretty significant margin. It's really high. His touchdown interception ratio is really, really high. Yards per attempt.
How do you factor in fumbles or other turnovers generally? Or
I didn't grab fumbles.
I didn't know. I mean, because like fumbles is hard sometimes to argue. I mean, you get sacked.
Have any of them been fumbling a lot? I don't think so. But.
I mean, I think I remember Lamar looking at Lamar's turnovers as being his general turnover number was like significantly higher than just, obviously than just his fumble. Just his interceptions. But I think the thing about fumbles is like you could have a botched snap and that's a quarterback fumble and things like that. So it's hard. And I guess interceptions could not be your fault, like all 4 of Lamar's are.
Fumbles is a good one, though. I should pull that. One area where Lamar is notably higher is yards per attempt.
Yeah,
8.9. Number 1, Allen is 7.7, which is 9. Burrow is 11th at also 7.7. So it's like basically a tie. So that's where Lamar starts to separate a little bit. But some of that is again the nature of the offense.
Right, yeah, but I think that stat is a significant one for passers that we all tend to respect, and I think the distance that you said doesn't capture how big a gap it is. Like that is a significant gap for that stat. But anyway,
and it's remarkable that he is pushing the ball down the field, or that's the yards per attempt, but that the interceptions are as low as they are. Right. I would say that's probably like the most impressive. There's a lot that's impressive about this Lamar season, but that is one of the most impressive things is the aggression without turnovers. Yeah. So, and I realized yards per attempt, he is also in air yards per attempt. He's above the rest. So it's not just like guys getting yards after the catch. This is, okay, so EPA per dropback, just dropback. Lamar first, 0.33. Josh Allen third. He's actually tied for second with Jared Goff, 0.26. Burrow is 7th, 0.17. This, to me, Lamar leads them all in big plays, but it's actually really close between him and Allen. Then Burrow is at 9th. Success rate, all pretty close. Lamar is in the lead. So this is one that really jumped out to me, and I think this is actually maybe the best statistical case for Lamar. DVOA, which accounts for opponent.
Yeah.
Lamar is first, 51% value over average. Allen is third, but drops to 27%. And then Burrow is 5th and drops to 19%. So what that reflects, So what that reflects, Domonique, is that Lamar has faced the hardest schedule. And that actually surprised me. It was by a pretty significant margin. He has faced the hardest schedule this year. Baltimore's faced the 5th hardest schedule. And then of defenses, just defenses. Right. Cincinnati 17, Buffalo 19, actually. And so when you look at their games and you try to look at the signature wins, that's where I think Josh Allen is a little bit challenged because he hasn't faced that many good defenses. But that, again, that's not his. It's just you play the teams in front of you. I was looking at win quality. Josh Allen, really bad against Baltimore. Houston, his worst game of the year. It's a very good defense. Kansas City balled out. That's probably his signature game. And then like this like recent stretch, like the Rams, the Lions, we kind of now know those aren't really good defenses. Burrow, to me, has had better performances against really good defenses. The Eagles, notably, is a contrast with Lamar. He was good against Pittsburgh. Lamar destroyed Buffalo, destroyed the Broncos, who Burrow also did, by the way, sorry. Eagles, he was okay. Steelers, one bad, one great performance, and then Texans he destroyed. So I'm sorry, that was like a monologue, but this is kind of all the pieces I was gathering. We can get to some of the other things that matter here in terms of supporting cast and narratives and all that, but I think statistically it's really hard to make a case for anyone but Lamar.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been widely accepted. I think it's hard if you're going to go raw statistics. I think you brought some things in here that I didn't even anticipate because I'd kind of accepted the statistical case for Lamar, but the strength of opponent is something that I hadn't considered. And if you would have asked me, I might not have said Lamar. I certainly would have thought it was a gap as big as you're saying, because I think that some of this narrative stuff is not true. And part of it is like the narrative of Lamar in big games is different than the narrative of Josh Allen in these big important games. And we have Lamar leading with a near game-winning drive in the first game of the year to the Chiefs, compared to Joe Burrow, or excuse me, compared to Joe Burrow also leading a near game-winning drive against the Chiefs, but Josh Allen actually getting the job done and having the only win over the Chiefs this year. It wasn't game-winning drive, but a game-clinching drive with a signature Heisman-esque type play, which that's the thing that jumps out is often we remember these seasons based on specific plays. This has been a ridiculous season for highlights. I mean, yeah, even if you throw Saquon back in there with his backwards hurdle and all his long runs, but like these guys, I mean, Joe Burrow just did a diving touchdown pass a couple weeks ago. It's just ridiculous moments that we've had all year long.
Yeah, the signature wins thing I wanted to highlight because I think that's where it gets really dicey, because the biggest case for Allen is that the Chiefs win, right? Because I mean, he did get destroyed by Baltimore, but it was a while ago.
Right.
And then
which I mean, saying it's sorry to cut you off, but saying it's a while ago.
Oh yeah, no,
like, right.
I just
okay.
bringing it up. That's why nobody remembers it. Like if Baltimore and Buffalo played right now,
yeah, it's a different game.
This wouldn't even be a conversation. Everybody, if that game was happening now, nobody would.
Yeah,
they would be over. So, but point is, the fact that he did that against the Chiefs and the other two, it just is what it is. Now, the common opponents thing. So Allen has the Chiefs over Lamar. Lamar has the Texans over him. And Allen's worst game were earlier in the season. That's, I think, a big part of this, what's driving this. Like the Texans' loss was earlier in the season, so everybody's kind of forgotten it. So, Lamar comes out and destroys them. I think, like, when you look at just the win quality, it is pretty close between Lamar and Burrow. Like, looking at some of these Burrow performances, I mean, his performance against Philadelphia is really good. Like, but I'm not a QB wins person. I always point that out, but I guess it is notable that when these teams have played, Lamar's won, right? Like I think the Bengals games are close. The Bills game was not close.
I think obviously we all know that wins are not a quarterback stat, but wins are something that have traditionally factored. I think that's the biggest question for me is like, how do you think about, as someone who votes, how do you think about your vote? Do you want to keep it within the bounds of like historical precedent, or is it some different variation of it? Because that's why I've kind of thrown Burrow out of this conversation, is because I can think of times in the past where guys have won with a story like Lamar, or with a story or season like Lamar, or something like what Josh Allen has done. I think I would be open to Burrow as a potential winner if this was last season, or if there were not guys who were putting up numbers as impressive as his on actual teams.
More impressive.
That are, more impressive. But I just mean in the neighborhood. Like if he was the only guy doing this and they only had 9 wins, I'd be like, okay, give it to him. But that's so I don't know. I would love to hear how you think about that.
No, I think it's funny. I'm not a quarterback wins person. I think wins do matter for MVP, right? I think it's fair that they matter. Right. Now, people will point to Burrow and say, well, he didn't win those games because of his defense. And I would push back and say, well, like Jackson lost some of those games because his defense was for half the season.
Yep.
His field goal kicker couldn't make kicks his kicker couldn't make kicks. Like, he wins that game if Justin Tucker makes some kicks. So I just, that's some of the tricky part with wins. Burrow also did have opportunities to lead game-winning drives in some of those, and he didn't. Like, Washington comes to mind. They lose to the Washington again. His defense is very clearly why the Bengals record is what it is. I am not disputing that. But this idea that, he has been absolutely perfect outside of them is just not accurate. I also dispute the notion that he is just, getting no help. And I mean, I'm sorry, he is the two best receivers in football. The lack of a run game is really, really a big deal. And the offensive line is very clearly the worst compared to the other two quarterbacks. So, and his defense sucks. So I'm not saying he's,
the other quarterbacks would trade their entire receiving cores and possibly a close family member for those two receivers on their team. So that's like inarguable. He has a great situation there.
Take a beat. I want to take a beat to just appreciate T. Higgins. I don't know what's going to happen there in terms of is this going to be the end of it? I really don't, because I think T. Higgins probably deserves so much more money than people anticipate. But just watching him against the Broncos, I mean, I feel like
he was giving Riley Moss the blues, man. My guy Riley was having a rough outing, rough return to the field.
There were plays too where Moss actually had good coverage on him.
Yeah, I know.
And Burrow threw some absolutely beautiful. I mean, there was a play in that game. I posted about this. It was on the, I think, the game-winning or tying drive. It was a third down to Higgins. It was like a 12-yard pass Burrow makes. He escapes, sort of evades pressure, climbs up, escapes to his right, and throws it into just a pinhole of a window to Higgins. I mean, it's one of the most amazing. Burrow has made some of the most impressive throws of the entire NFL season. So I don't want to sound like I'm diminishing him. I just don't like this idea that he's got nothing and these other guys. Yeah. So I saw. Look, I love Dan. That's my guy.
Gosh.
But I saw he was talking about sort of the separation aspect for Lamar versus Burrow. I mean, separation we can't use this way, because separation is a function of so many things. It is about the structure of the offense, the way defenses play you, the fact that they use a lot of play action, the fact that you have a good run game that is, frankly, in part because of the quarterback. Not frankly, it's just true. The reason Burrow throws all these tight window throws is because that's the nature of their offense. Their offense is that way because Joe Burrow doesn't run play action, amongst other things. That's just how it is. It doesn't mean he is.
It's also a function of your quarterback too.
Yeah, right.
It's like using your eyes to these are. Yeah, it's a that.
You're throwing open guys in part because you're making good decisions,
Right.
Which isn't to say that Joe Burrow's making bad decisions. It's just
right. And you're using your eyes to manipulate the defense. There's lots of different things. More information is always better when you know how to use the information. So I don't want to dispose of the separation numbers altogether, but I do think that's a bit as a measure of receiver talent, and people used it for Ayuk a bunch last year, and I remember looking at all of those plays and being Ayuk had a lot of separation because Christian McCaffrey was often very close to him in those routes. So it's a convoluted thing. So we don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
It all works together is what we're saying, I think. And that's part of the process. So statistically, we just did a bunch of stats for quarterbacks, but I think for other positions, it's really hard to say, well, here's some stats that show this team is the best this and that, or I think you and I agree that in terms of discussing supporting casts, the Bengals clearly have the best receivers. I think the Bills have the best offensive line. I will say I think the Ravens offensive line has really improved as the season goes along and they've gelled as a unit. I would still put the Bills, above them. And then Lamar has obviously the best tight ends and best backs. Are we in agreement about?
Yeah.
So as a whole, supporting casts, do you feel, because I think the best case for Allen, and I think this is a case I will give some credence to, is he has been the biggest elevator of the players around him. I think there is validity to that.
Yeah, I think that's the best argument for Josh Allen. The problem with that argument is I looked before before we sat down to do this at win expectancy, what ESPN put out before the season started, and I think the Ravens were at like 10.6 or something, and the Bills were at 10. So like I remember entering the season saying the Bills would take a step back. The Bills are not as competitive. This
Yeah.
is like this their window slightly closed, getting ready to reopen when Coleman develops and whatever. And actually, like by projection, they are not like blowing away the expectations in a way that we thought. And so that doesn't mean that
Vegas
those
knows.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't mean, yeah. It just means that my perception of it was different because I remember back then thinking like, they'll be competitive for the division, but whatever. I picked them to
Speak
win
for
the division
yourself.
because I
Speak
didn't
for
believe
yourself.
in
I
the
had them
Jets.
5th overall in the NFL. I pulled up my preseason rankings.
Nice.
So
I mean, I had them winning the division. I probably had them pretty high also, but I didn't think they were a Super Bowl contender, which I do think they are now. And
yeah.
that leads me to another point. If you don't mind, I take
Yeah.
the steering wheel for
Yeah.
a second.
Please.
One of the things that has come to my mind, and I talked about on my show that is super interesting about the MVP race that I hadn't considered before, is how much everyone else around the league impacts this. Because like it came to my mind because last year Lamar won the MVP in large part because he was the best remaining guy. There was no one running away with it in a
Late
way that
season
people,
wins was
yeah,
huge.
the
Big
late
late
season.
season wins.
That's
Yeah.
another example of like recency bias impacting it. But
Completely.
like last year, you could say that, and then this year, you could make a same case because I do think that if Josh Allen was the 1 seed in the AFC, he would be far and away the
Yeah.
MVP person because the Chiefs managed to be 15-1. That makes his impressive season seem slightly less impressive. And then the other point that came to my mind as we were looking at the schedule a few weeks ago, like Lamar could get back in this race with the Steelers game and with the
Yeah.
Houston game. And I looked at Josh Allen's rundown and I was like, if only the Jets were good. If only
Yeah. I
if
know.
Josh Allen was beating out a competitive Jets team that had
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers balling to win this division and then had a big game last week against that would have put this away. It
Not
would have
playing
put
week
it away.
18.
And it's
Really.
just
Yeah.
and like I
No.
mean change nothing else but give
Yeah.
the Chiefs a couple more losses or make the Jets and Aaron Rodgers a formidable division opponent and we'd have a whole different conversation about Josh Allen.
Lamar is playing on Saturday ahead of the Bengals because they want him to play.
Right.
And then Joe Burrow is playing ahead of the Chiefs Broncos games because so there's a chance for these two guys too to, if either of them has dominant Saturdays and then the Bengals somehow squeak into the playoffs, he's going to get Burrow is going to get a major late season push, especially if he does it against the Steelers defense. That's good, right? I mean, the Browns defense, pardon me, is also good. So both of these quarterbacks are playing good defenses to the end of the year, and Allen isn't going to play because he doesn't need to play. It is just funny how much of it, you're right, is determined by the order in which things happen. Like I said, if the Bills Texans game was more recent, whatever. I would look, if I would argue if Patrick Mahomes was playing the way he has the last couple of weeks, he might be my pick because he has the best worst supporting cast argument, in my opinion.
And the way that he's winning these games. So many of them is on him at the end.
One more thing I wanted to throw out in terms of supporting cast is play calling. I actually think that doesn't give the edge to anyone because I think both Todd Monken and Joe Brady have been fantastic. The Bengals, again, it's just a Joe Burrow offense. Sorry. Like it just, you could say, wow, he doesn't have it yet. It's because of the way he plays quarterback. I dispute the idea that his life would be so much easier. It'll be interesting if Higgins leaves. So I guess, okay. So just to kind of wrap up the supporting cast aspect of this, I do think Josh Allen has the best case there, even though I am laughing at this idea that this sudden late argument that like Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Nelson Aguilar, this powerhouse trio, is ridiculous. I also believe Derrick Henry benefits more from the presence of Lamar than vice versa. That is supported by statistics. Also, when Derrick Henry is not on, they help each other.
No. I guess I would say that who benefits more from the other is irrelevant. But I mean, I think you're
Yeah, I
right
just
that
mean like
Lamar
this.
helped. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Lamar
at one
helps
point
Derek more than Derek helps Lamar, but
yeah.
Derek helps Lamar more than any other running back in this
In
race
this
help.
trio, yeah. Although,
Yeah.
can I say, like,
They
James
got a little
Cook's
love for
awesome.
Cook. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel
A
like he's
little
kinda
love for
getting
James Cook.
on in this whole, the Bengals are the one who really don't have a run game, and that's not because of Chase Brown, that's because of their line and their system. But, James Cook, I pulled up rushing DVOA, Derrick Henry is 2nd, James Cook is 3rd amongst
Damn.
backs. Rushing yard over
I mean, what's
expected.
third
Yeah.
third by how many like
Not
percentage
much.
points?
It's
Not much?
close.
Oh, because
Yeah.
I think I guess this is all anecdotal, but like that Bills game that the Ravens played,
Yeah.
that was a Derrick Henry MVP case
Well,
booster, if anybody.
and that's the other thing about the Bills, the Ravens, though. A lot of it is the structure of the structure. I keep saying structure, the nature of those defenses too,
Right.
right? Because the
Yeah.
Bills' defense, I think, just happens to be weak, where the Ravens are strong. If these teams match up, I'm going to pick the Ravens again, probably because of that. And it's not even about Josh Allen, which again, so when I go back and I say, well, the Ravens crushed the Bills, yeah, but I actually don't think it's because Lamar is better than Josh Allen. I
Right.
just think
Yeah.
those teams, the way they match up, favors Baltimore. It's so tricky. I mean, the
Yeah.
other and I want and by the way, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite. James Cook benefits from Josh Allen
Oh yeah.
being back
Oh
there.
yeah.
That's the other
Absolutely.
thing about like this Allen versus Lamar aspect is like they both are such dynamic and efficient rushing threats. Everything that happens in their offenses flows from their dual threat ability, which of course Allen displayed in the biggest moment against Kansas City. Um, let's talk about Saquon really quickly before we do the decision. Um, so I so Saquon leads all backs in rush yards over expected, which is a stat I like because it tries to capture how much is
Yeah.
the running back actually doing. Um, also, rush yards over expected per carry. He is 7th in DVOA, so I think some of that is opponent. And he's first in yards before contact per carry. Shout out the
Yeah.
Eagles offensive line.
Yeah.
Um, my feeling about him, and I'm going to get to this when I get to my resolutions shortly, is he is what he is put on display this season what a back can do.
Mhm.
Because we have like this control. We have seen this dominant Eagles run game blocking unit with other backs, and you put in a running back who's truly, truly special, and you see the difference. You also see how much he's helped by that offensive line. It was just like turbocharging, taking a great back and a great offensive line. Boom. It's amazing. If he breaks Dickerson's record, I don't think we'll see if he's going to play.
Yeah.
Um, I do think, you have to consider the historic
Yeah.
aspect of this, but it's just too hard for me
Yeah.
when I think about these 3 quarterbacks and the way that they're playing to put him in the
He
conversation.
Not this year. Like, not this year is what I would say to Saquon Barkley, MVP proponents is like maybe a different year, even if he breaks a record. And I think it seems like Adam Schefter was insinuating that they're not going to play him. But let's say hypothetically they play him and he breaks the record. That is still not enough for me, in part because of all the arguments that you would make against the quarterbacks you can make even stronger against Saquon. Like, this team's awesome. He's clearly like, I called him icing on my podcast, which might not be fair, but like his team is gonna be good with or without Saquon. He makes him a whole new version, but like he's not the key
Yeah,
to this offense. But
it's the
I had a
line,
yeah,
man. They're
I
so
had an
good. I was watching that Dallas game, just
yeah,
watching them
just mashing, yeah.
just mash them. They're so freaking good.
The interesting thing about the Saquon race to me that it came to me this morning on one of the TV shows is I thought Saquon's injuries and being drafted by the Giants would keep him out of the Hall of Fame, but they're not going for this record. And I think that had he got this record, that like changes the calculus on all of this. So while if he were to go get this record, like it makes it a realistic possibility that he gets in the Hall of Fame, which now I kind of think it's probably really unlikely for him to do that, considering
You
his
think?
impact.
Interesting. What if they win a Super Bowl?
Yeah, if they win a Super Bowl and he's the MVP, it's like I think of Terrell Davis as the example. He made it to the Hall of Fame in large part because of He got 2,000 yards, and his playoff runs were insane. And like he didn't have the longevity of most of the other guys that we put in the Hall of Fame. So I think Saquon is like, if they make a deep run this year and next year, that matters. But if he gets the all-time record, a record that only 3 other people have ever held, like that's pretty cool.
It's gonna be an interesting. I'm interviewing Lane Johnson in an hour. I'm gonna ask him what he thinks.
Oh, did you see his quote? He said,
He just said,
yeah, that he
right?
didn't want to play.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not he didn't want to play, but like
He
yeah.
thought Saquon should say, yeah. I mean, it's tricky. Speaking of history, by the way, I'm not a passer rating person, but Lamar Jackson has a chance of having the highest passer rating ever in NFL history. Right now, it's 121.6. Only one season ever has eclipsed that mark. Aaron Rodgers in 2011, 122.5.
I mean, I know you know why that's so impressive, but for those who don't understand, passer rating was kind of discarded by smart football people as an evaluation specifically because it underappreciates the value of someone like Lamar Jackson. So the idea that Lamar Jackson is so good at the thing at the stat that shortchanges him it's just like crazy. He's leading the league in rush yards too for quarterbacks, right? I assume so.
Yeah.
Like 50.
Yeah.
He's going to get over 5,000 total yards, which is an incredible milestone that not a bunch of quarterbacks have made. And I'm sure anyone who's made it has probably been in large part because of their passing. It's not a combination.
I'm going to vote for Lamar.
Yeah.
However, and I think the deciding thing for me ended up being strength of schedule, to be honest. That was the thing that really jarred me. I mean, first of all, it's the fact that he's a leader and all these things, but also, just kind of looking at the teams that he's beat, some of the common opponents, the fact that he's beaten these quarterbacks. I know people are going to be like, you're such a hypocrite about wins, but whatever. Yeah. We're trying to figure out, signature moments and all of that. I will say, we're taping this week. If he drops a total dud this weekend, I'm probably gonna go Allen because it's that close for me.
Yeah.
And so my rankings ultimately were Lamar, Allen, then Burrow. Mm-hmm. But God, if Burrow goes nuts this weekend and they somehow squeak into the playoffs.
Yeah, so you haven't fully decided yet, clearly.
I haven't fully decided, but I'm heavily leaning Lamar. How about you?
Yeah, I'm not important enough to have a vote, so I am casting my ballot through you, and I think I agree with you. I think I like to ask myself the other side is like, if I didn't give it to Lamar, what more would he have to do? Or if I didn't give it to Allen, what more would he have to do? And I have a real hard time looking at Lamar do all of this stuff in all these statistical categories on a good team and say, well, you should have won more. It's like you can look at Josh Allen and be like, well, you could have played better than Lamar. Like, you actually could have played better.
Yeah, it's they both had a couple duds this year. Yeah. It's not like anyone's been
3
flawless.
rushing touchdowns and passing touchdowns in one game. No, that was awesome.
It's really close. Yeah, it's really, really close. All right. Football resolutions. I'm making a few to wrap up today's show. As we head into the new year. Number 1, I wrote 4 down. You ready?
Okay. Let me go.
1, I will never have faith again in a quarterback in their 30s or older coming off of an Achilles injury.
Yeah, that's a good resolution. Tom Brady. Yeah, he didn't come off an Achilles injury.
Yeah.
I was thinking that a resolution that I should have made a long time ago, but week 2 doesn't matter. Like, if you look at the standings this year or week 2, like the Ravens were 0-2. I think the Seahawks were 2-0. They ended up being 3-0. The Saints were 2-0. It's like we were already hiring Kubiak away to another team. Yeah, you just gotta ignore week 2. You gotta wait.
Number 2, offensive line play is everything.
Oh, finally, I brought you over to my side.
It's increasingly, I'm just like, this is whether a team's gonna be good or bad. If you think about like a team like Denver that surprised so much I mean, their offensive line's been awesome this year. There's a litany of reasons for that, right?
You
The
gotta
team's
whisper
top
this
the
though.
NFL. It's
This
just,
is my secret that no one else knows except for me.
if I was building a team, I would pour literally everything into the offensive line. All right. Number 3, a good running back is worth paying if you have a good offensive line.
Yeah.
Kind of flows from that off of the Barkley
It's
conversation. That'll be
it
interesting. We can
is.
revisit that in free agency. There's no one hitting free agency like this last year with Jacobs, Barkley, and Henry. But number 4, this is my final one. Quarterbacks can get better with
Yep.
age,
Oh,
with good coaching.
yeah. I was wondering, so I had something similar to that, and it's not just the older quarterbacks. It's even 1 year later of Bryce, or I mean, a half a season later of Bryce. It's like I have been one to give up on guys when they show they don't have it. Yeah, there are situations and circumstances that can bring the best out of a talent.
All right. You had any? Any you want to throw in or?
Nope,
No?
that was it. I snuck one in earlier, and then I piggybacked on that one. We're good. I like it, and I'm claiming the O lineman one because, as you know, every year.
You can have that. Domonique, you have a live show in New York in a couple weeks. Am I correct? You want to let people know about that, or maybe some of our listeners are in New York City?
Sure. Or maybe they want to come to New York City, January 15th, at the Whitby. We will be putting up the tickets. I don't know if they're already up. They might be already up very soon. I don't know
I
the
saw a
website.
post about it. They are up.
Oh, you did?
Look really get that squared away. I'm just trying to give you an opportunity to advertise this program. You guys
Are you
can
coming? Or you got to figure out where your
I'm
playoff
waiting to
game
see
is
where
gonna
I'm going for the playoff game. My sincere hope is that we get the Rams.
be. Yeah, I get it. I understand.
We'll
You
see.
you have
We'll
a
see.
baby. You can stay home.
Could be
But I mean,
Buffalo, in which case, if it's Buffalo, maybe I'll swing by on the way back.
yeah,
Or
I would
Philly.
appreciate it, but we have to get a bigger venue if you come.
Go to check out the Domonique Foxworth Show, regardless, wherever you get your podcasts. This week, because week 18 is Cheeks, we will be previewing, obviously, there's like really only one game that really is worth talking about. But Ben and I are going to go through every team that didn't make the playoffs and give the biggest reason why. So if you are a sad fan of the Seahawks, the Saints, I don't know, I'm just throwing out Cowboys, whatever, every other team that didn't make the playoffs, you'll have a reason to listen. Otherwise, until then.